the transport passes by some Marines on some of their own flying transports say there's a big fight happening at the airport, and Sam asks Elena to redirect because he wants a piece of the action. I mean, okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were trying to save the professor against everyone's wishes.
You work out your grief however you want, Belle.
You fly by there, and there's like an Argus hanging out and shoots Sam's transport out of the sky, and he hits the ground really hard. And Elena freaks out that Sam is dead. First of all, another like fake out death thing. Like, I don't think he's dead, and I don't think anyone playing thinks he's dead.
No.
And doesn't Elena have like a vitals readout or something to say that he's clearly alive?
Yeah.
Of all the remote things.
He also has one on his suit.
It's weird. They do this a couple of times later, and it's just...
I kind of get why they do it, like, it's to show just how much punishment the suit can take, but there's definitely more elegant ways of handling that.
Every other chapter just, oh no, the main character's dead. Like, of course the main character's not fucking dead. Who are we gonna play as? Burns?
Turns out Zaitsev was the protagonist all along.
I'd love to have a jetpack, but yeah, we can talk about it later. So in this area, there are little sphere things that roll at you. Well, they don't actually roll on the ground. They pick up speed in midair and ram you, but they fold out into turrets. They're called like A2 spheres. There are not a lot of these in the game. They're a little bit annoying, but there's just so few of them. I sure killed a couple of them. Yeah.
They're kind of fun to kick around because they're basically beach balls.
I never really actually tried melee on them. I should have. And when you go into the next hall, a door shuts behind you and a bunch of enemies come in. Elena shouts, "It's a trap," and Sam says, "Thanks for the update, Admiral."
Oh god, yeah. It's just so weirdly out of place.
Well, I mean, yeah, an Admiral Akbar reference. Like, this is the second time the game approaches being clever, because it's like a reference but it's not direct. I thought it was kind of funny, but along with the eBay and Roomba stuff. I think this was going around as like a meme at the time, maybe.
I mean, that's been a meme since basically the internet began, really. It's such a popular thing.
Yeah, and this, like, for a trap, it's really not that hard at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he passed through here, though, and there's the Argus at the airport, the transformed one. And also a pre-transformed Argus.
Oh god, yeah.
And as you pull up in here, Burns comes in a transport. Oh my god, he's alive. Wow, oh, amazing.
What a surprise.
But then you get to fight two of them at the same time. In a surprisingly forgiving boss fight.
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't really focus on you at the same time. And the pre-transformed one doesn't transform when you kill it.
There is an achievement for killing both of them while they're transformed.
Oh, there is?
It doesn't transform unless you fuck up the QuickTime event. So you have to specifically fuck up the QuickTime event and then kill both of them to get the achievement. It's really odd. It's not massively difficult.
This game does have destructible cover, but not a lot. Mostly it's stuff that isn't like sandbags. Stuff like walls and pillars. Especially during this fight, this is the case where you'll have to stay on the move the most because projectiles will smash all the cover you hide behind.
Yeah.
The pre-transformed spider tank mode one, once you lower its health enough, the QTE you get has Sam dodging around, but then you just have to aim your gun at its weak point and fire, and it'll just do a ton of damage, and it's presented differently from when you do it in slow motion yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If you just do this correctly and slam on the fire button a lot, you'll kill it. It won't transform. Then, against the transformed one, Sam will run up its whole body and punch it in the face repeatedly until its head explodes.
Oh god, doesn't he just do a load of punches then actually end it with an uppercut like it's Rock'em Sock'em Robots?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I love that bit.
Also, I forgot, with the pre-transformed one, before you do the shooting, he jumps on top of it, and then he does like a ballerina spin really fast so that he drills through it.
Oh god, yeah. It's so ridiculous.
You can definitely tell that the animators were just having so much fun with those QTEs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So ultimately it's a pretty merciful boss fight. I don't think I got into critical health even my first playthrough. You definitely have to be careful still. There's no fight in this game where I think you can just flagrantly go into it without worrying about taking damage, but there are also not too many that I think are outright hard. So you get words that there are colony resistance forces holding out at an area called Grand Hill. Sam asks if it's tactically significant, and Burns freaks out. He's like, "Did I teach you those words at DARPA Pansy Academy?" He's really mad about Sam having an education.
Burns is fantastic, and you can tell that Stephen Bloom was having a fair amount of fun doing his lines, because he just puts on his most gravelly voice possible.
Mm-hmm.
He says all of these very silly lines, chews the scenery completely, and it's just such a fun time.
One of my favourite Burns lines I mentioned earlier is actually during the tunnel level, because right at the end, the APC you're escorting for the whole mission has a railgun on it, and just right at the end, he just fucking says, "Let's shove some tungsten up this tunnel's ass."
Yes!
Fucking wiener.
Yeah. Stephen Bloom also voices Wolverine, but he's even more gravelly here.
I'm pretty sure the voice directors just said, no, more gravel!
Yeah. Whereas Sam Gideon is voiced by Gideon Emery.
He is also fairly gravelly, but he does not even come close to Stephen Bloom, no matter how hard he tries.
More smug gravelly.
Yeah. It's this weird mixture of kind of smarmy, but also incredibly gravelly. It's kind of to the point where even Shinji Mikami made a very short blog post saying, "I love the voice actor of Sam Gideon, he is great."
Oh yeah, it's like his voice is so like smoky and cool. I think you'll like it a lot.
Yeah.
But he really likes Gideon Emery's voice.
It's one of the few blog posts that he actually did himself, and it's just this very short, very succinct thing saying, "I like this voice and you will too."
Yeah. Which, sure. Also, I mean, it's definitely one to talk about not being clever. Like, you just expect Sam and Burns to just start talking about how not gay they are.
Yes.
It's so macho. So unbelievably macho.
Honestly, for all the just weird, vaguely out of place cultural references in the game, I'm surprised none of them ever say no homo, honestly.
Yeah, it's I can see why like someone might bounce off of it. And I mean, even I, to a degree, was kind of like, okay, that's enough. But it is entertaining in a sort of just overblown nonsense kind of way. And I mean, these are Japanese developers who are deciding this is what Americans sound like versus, you know, Call of Duty or Gears of War or something, where that grit is somewhat tempered because they wanted to feel dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
So then you get to the Grand Hill sequence, and this is definitely one of the more difficult and lengthy gunfights. Literally, it's an uphill battle. The enemy's dug in, and this is where I got a lot of use of the lock-on laser, because you can just aim at everyone sort of vaguely and dim them out before proceeding. If you don't have it, then it's pretty tough. You'll have to move forward a lot of times under heavy fire and try to take cover right up against enemies sometimes.
It's really rough. I remember dying there so many times in my very hard run.
This is definitely one of the moments where the shotgun really shines though, because it is just so excellent for hit and run tactics. You run out, you shoot anything that tries to shoot you back, you dive into the next bit of cover, just rinse and repeat, and the game knows that because it gives you a ton of shotgun weapon drops.
Well, I mean, a lot of the enemies are using them also.
Very much capitalizes on the close quarter combat, and it kind of says, hey, is this shotgun? How do you like shotguns, huh?
Yeah, I use the shotgun a fair bit here too. This area is also a good mix because there are the wide open areas, but to open like gates to proceed forward, you enter like a smaller, more enclosed space where you're in really tight close quarters combat with enemies. The indoor places are probably more lethal than the outdoor areas too, because the enemies are all packing heavy weapons, and outdoors there are Marines with you, indoors you go in alone. It's one seamless sequence too, they don't really draw attention to it. And when you get to the next outdoor segment, a giant tower gets knocked down and starts rolling down the hill. There's a ton of debris and smoke here. The beginning showed it off pretty well, but here is where it's everywhere. And the game's still holding up and like moving pretty quickly. And you have to because you don't want to get hit by any of the debris flying down the hill. Quote by Takeo Kido, who's in charge of doing these environmental like particle effects and stuff, said, "Even when I'm watching a movie, I will say, that's some nice debris." Of course, those around me will say, "I have no idea why you're talking about debris, but I'm living my job, so I see nothing wrong with it." And as a man with this outlook on life, that was in charge of the debris in this game. You should hope everyone likes their job this much.
I know.
That they weird out their friends and family.
Just being so into your strangely specific job.
Once you get to the top of the hill, you encounter a new enemy, which is cool, but I hate them. Hate them. It's called a Bia, and it's a weird half-tiger, half-wizard man pouncing laser staff using machine.
Oh god, yeah, those things.
Yeah, they're really fast. The whole get behind them thing is a lot more dicey. I used a lot of EMP emitters to stun them.
Yeah, that's a fair way to do it.
Once you clear these guys out, you find the jamming transmitter that's stopping you from calling in support. The transmitter has giant lasers on it. It's like a laser merry-go-round with anti-air turrets on it. So you have to wait for a weak point to open up and then shoot it while it's charging its laser, and then after it fires it, it's pretty intense. Because also, between all the times the laser's not firing, lots of Romanovs come out. There are a lot. This has probably the highest density of them in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Once you blow up the transmitter, though, you get another cutscene. And it's not of your characters, it's President Winter's in a boardroom by herself. She gets a call.
And oh look, it's everybody's best friend Zaitsev, including the president apparently, because they've been working together. But this whole thing wasn't really in the plan. Zaitsev was being given funds and backing by Winters in private, kind of like, okay, if your Order of the Red Star kind of takes over the country, I'll support you, yada yada yada. Zaitsev does all that, and then he decides, you know what? I think I'm gonna wipe San Francisco off the map as well. Okay, thanks, bye.
Yeah, mutual exploitation is what their partnership was, and he just exploited her first. So, even with a new franchise, Shinji Mikami still makes President evil.
Well, I think that's a good time to call this podcast. Have fun, guys.
I'm leaving.
I thought of this like 2 weeks ago.
We thought the darkness was outside, but really, the evil was within.
Oh, look, now you're in on it too. Yeah, but after this scene, Winter's just angry and it cuts back to gameplay. This next sequence introduces two new enemies. First, you fight a variation of the Gorgi called the USG, and these have boosters on them, and try to surround you a whole lot. And if you weren't using boost to try and take them down before, you're probably going to need it at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I could not hit these things very easily in regular speed. Also, there's a drilling version of the Romanov called the Romanov D.
D for drill. I can't actually remember them that well.
Yeah, there aren't a lot.
I don't think they have much special to them outside of they have a drill and they can whack you with it.
Well, they also drill underground.
Yeah.
Which can be really annoying because you just have to get away. You can't be near them when they pop back up.
Mm-hmm.
On top of all this, then another enemy breaks through the wall. Remember how there were saw drill transports? Now there's a buzzsaw tank. And it's just called Tank. It's called Tank. Bust through a wall, and you can't be near this thing, or you'll get sawed. They're not too bad. The weak points are pretty easy to hit, but you have to constantly stay on the move, because these things keep moving, they have guns on them, and the saws. And then there's also some floating platform things with guns on them called air gatlings you fight, which have a Gorgi piloting them.
Mm-hmm.
And you can either shoot down the platform or the Gorgi, but what's only special about these things is that they fire really, really fast.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't ignore them, and you can't really outmaneuver them either. You really have to take them out from far away without getting close, which does slow things down a bit. After you clear that section, you reach a road, and you see a giant warship, which Burns identifies as a Creon, which is just a huge warship with a ton of guns on it. I guess they see Sam and Burns together, and they're like, well, we gotta take care of this. So this giant warship blows up the road you're on.
I just absolutely have to stress how gigantic the Creon is. Like, it's the size of a proper battleship, but it is hovering in the colony, just stock still. It is fantastic. I just love the sense of scale that it has.
I think the best way to sum it up is the Creon is so big, it is literally its own level.
Yes.
When I say it blows up the road starts collapsing after it gets shot. So you're in a segment where you have to get through certain portions of the road before they fall into an abyss. Which is weird, because later you'll find that Sam has, like, jets on his suit that can let him fly a bit. So I really don't know why falling would kill you, because it's the only place where you could fall and die. But, I mean, Metal Gear Rising had a part where you can fall and die too, and then it's revealed later in a cutscene in that one that Raiden can survive incredibly long falls and not die.
Mm-hmm.
He can survive the fall and then not die. It's what I just said. It just makes you go, move ahead at a decent pace without focusing too much on killing every last enemy in front of you. They do put up a fair amount of resistance, but it's to get you to just push on. Like, I think in a lot of ways your first playthrough of Vanquish is going to try and teach you some things for your second. And in this case, it's that you don't need to kill everything that's in your way, even if it's in a good position to hit you. Just keep moving.
Mm-hmm.
And once the road collapses behind you, Burns and everyone wants to wait on a transport to go on ahead. But Sam wants to take the monorail.
Sam is an idiot.
So how about in this game where you can jet around at high speeds, you do a stealth sniping sequence?
Oh, God, that part.
My least favourite part of the game right here.
Yeah, I described the tunnel chapter as one of my least favourite chapters, but I must have just struck that out of my mind.
For very good reason.
At this part, you have to shoot searchlights before the monorail reaches them. And to do that, you have to pick up one of the sniper rifles on board, which is a special silenced sniper rifle, and you have to shoot the lights out before you get too close. If you do get caught, then the enemies will just open up on you and damage the monorail. If the monorail takes too much damage, it explodes and you die instantly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not that bad to play, it's just not that exciting.
Completely against the tone of the rest of the game.
I mean, if at least it was a sequence where you moved on your own and had to take some stuff out from long range before fighting other things in close range, that could work.
Mm-hmm.
But just being on this slow-moving thing...
Yeah, just being put literally on rails is just...
Yeah, probably the one redeeming feature of this whole section is that it's pretty much the one time that you see the colony at night. And that's really cool because you get a chance.
Yeah.
When you're kind of in a lull between the shooting sections, you can just look out over the colony and it looks really good. But why does it have to be at that point?
Oh, I know.
Being on the ground at night would be even cooler.
Yeah.
Maybe something where you move building to building, on the rooftops, that would be
There's
cool.
one other section where it's at night, and that's when you're going through the big monument in the city centre, and you're just dashing through all of what's basically the market when the colony was still a thing, and not taken over by horrible robots.
Yeah. Also, Chivo Talk, there is a achievement in the stealth sniping section for finishing it without getting caught once. And I think it's called something along the lines of, no, that's the other Sam.
Great. That's kind of confusing, because there's one point where a warship called the Buzzard shows up partway through, and it kind of finds you no matter what. And this thing specifically is okay to shoot with your regular unsilenced guns, which I didn't know, so I wasted all my silent sniper rifle bullets trying to kill it, and it just did a ton of damage to the monorail. But yeah, you can just blow this thing up with regular guns, then switch back to sniping. You only have to stealth snipe the searchlights. But this takes you up to the Creon. Even once you kill all the enemies, there's just this sort of segment afterwards where you come out of the tunnel, and you're just kind of slowly waiting on the monorail to get to the other end, which they really could have cut out. Just like transition to a cutscene to show them at the end of it earlier. Then you land near where the Creon is, and you need to protect a railgun team, led by a soldier marked as S. Mikami. So, yeah, you have to protect the game's director from being killed by all the enemies. And this is pretty much a turret sequence. There are a few turrets here, there's nothing else to use them on. This one also kind of drags, because you can kill all the enemies and still have to wait for more to come out.
Mm-hmm.
And then to proceed through past the Creon, you have to shoot its legs when it lifts them up to walk by. It hovers, but it also has legs to walk with. And if you're close by, then the heat will overheat your suit, and there are segments where it's outputting so much heat that it overheats you the whole time you're near it, which is tough for this segment because the Creon is huge, as we mentioned, and it has huge storage areas where a ton of robots hide. So as you're running alongside it, these things pop open and everybody ever shoots you.
Mm-hmm. This is the part I was talking about where I imagine it's probably best to get Old Lang Syne achievement for killing 10 enemies distracted by a single cigarette, but even then it's just difficult.
Also, probably where the explanation I'd think of for why the cigarette, the robots would just see a heat source flicking by and aim for that.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much fire that your suit is overheating all the time.
Yeah.
How are they going to see a single cigarette? Once you complete the sequence, the railgun team blows a hole in the Creon, and then Sam uses a wire gun to grapple hook his way in. Which, that seems really cool, and also something I would want to use in a sequel. Plus with a booster, are you kidding?
Yeah.
That would definitely be something that I would love to see in Vanquish 2, simply because I'm a sucker for more mobility. Just give me all of the options to traverse a level, yes please.
But he just uses it to fly into the Creon. And then you get on another monorail?
This whole section just very much feels like a Friday afternoon development process. Okay, we're at this stretch of the game, there's this huge warship. What do we do between those? Monorails!
Considered a forced stealth section.
The only thing they really do with this, and I think the reason they did do it, is so that you can see this mass of scrap skitter off screen. Which is a little bit oh, wait, what the hell was that? But you find out immediately, because once you reach the end of the monorail, an enemy attacks you, called Unknown. Not that you don't know its name, it's called Unknown. This is a funny enemy, I kind of like it.
Yeah, it's a very interesting enemy. It's also that kind of enemy. It's a Shinji Mikami game staple of having an enemy that can kill you in one hit.
Yeah, this guy can be very troublesome your first time through, especially if you don't know that he has the instant kill grab, because it's oh, this guy's going to... Oh no! Oh no!
Oh god, I'm dead.
No, he's just standing there. That's why.
Yeah.
It's to give me time to get out of the way, not to shoot it.
Thankfully, it's one of the only enemies that has that.
Yeah.
I think it's the only enemy that has that.
I think there are other enemies who technically have it, but you can at least do something against that.
It's not super unfair, and I actually didn't know it had an instant kill grab the first time I played.
I don't know if I did either, but the problem is as soon as I figure out an enemy has an instant kill attack, I just become so agitated while fighting it.
It does change sort of how you approach the fight.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this is also a good time to bring up another quote. Ippei Shiraki did the sound design for this game. He mentioned, for creatures that are quote-unquote alive, you tend to create sounds by putting effects and changing up existing animal sounds. But in Vanquish, I relied heavily on synthesizers to create something completely different. One of the members of our sound design team really loves synthesizers, so I was able to hand off quite a bit of the enemy's sound design duties to him. LOL.
That was almost professional. So close.
I think that sums up a lot of Platinum games, though. Almost professional.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's true. The enemies all have sort of personality that's presented through the sounds they make, and unknown sounds and like looks kind of like if you made one of those sort of like blobbier monstrosities from Resident Evil into like a robot form. That's what unknown kind of seems like when it's got all its pieces. Then when you expose its core and blow all the pieces off, the core is just like a giant orb head and has the tiniest pipe cleaner arms and legs, and it just runs around like a doofus trying to recollect its parts while you shoot it. And then it sounds really silly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's basically screaming for its life as it's running around trying not to get shot by you, and it's hilarious. Especially if you're having trouble with the boss and you just get to that part. Because it completely deflates any tension that you might have against it. Just like, what is this? It's great.
It's also kind of fun to smack it about with melee.
For sure. This is also a good time to mention the last weapon. You can get it really early, like everything, like you can get these at different times. This is the last DLC weapon, and it is the best one. It just is the best gun. It's called the laser cannon, and it doesn't have ammunition. It's powered by your ARS gauge. Does a ton of damage. Since it doesn't ever have not full ammo, every pickup gives it an upgrade or progress towards an upgrade.
It's just such a good weapon. It was genuinely the thing that got me through very hard mode. It takes a bit of getting used to because it works just like your boost or stopping time where, you know, you use it too much and you'll go into overheating. But once you get the sort of timing on letting go of the trigger before you've run out down, it's just such a good weapon because it just does so much damage.
It also has to spin up a bit before you can fire it.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a big deal. I think I did try, like, let's just see how much I can drain my gauge. And if you try to boost and shoot, where it automatically goes into slow motion with the laser cannon, you can do it for 2 seconds.
Yeah, it's even worse on very hard mode, by the way, because the thing about the increased difficulties is the higher your difficulty goes, the less ARS time you have. Which means less boosting and less time slowing.
Yeah. But I mentioned the laser now because it is really effective against the unknown.
Yeah.
Like, it just trashes the thing. That's probably why I didn't have to worry about the instant kill attack, because it just does so much damage and breaks it apart easily.
Dead immediately. It's really powerful.
And then you get to the core of the Creon, well, the outer core, where it's cycling energy, so you have to time your passage through so that it's not cycling, otherwise you'll be vaporized, which is not so bad. It encourages you to move forward, but then again, there's not much of a rush, because most of the enemies in this area are these little things called spy bits, which are barely a thing. I mean, they are supposed to mostly be cameras, but they're just a little annoying things.
Yeah.
Once you get through here, you take an elevator up, and you get to see a fun sequence. There's a chicane in cover form, but it's not being cover, it's being a boombox, and it's playing disco music, and you see the Gorgies dancing to it.
That is one of my favourite moments of the game right now.
I love that that's just a thing that you come across.
It just comes completely out of nowhere. You have no reason to suspect that it's actually coming. It's gone almost as quickly because you can just shoot them all to pieces if you feel like it. It's just brilliant. I love it.
Once you kill them, then you just see a bunch of random junk fall from the ceiling slowly, and it makes like the most comical cartoon person knocked a bunch of stuff over noises. But then an unknown core falls in and forms around all the junk, and you fight another one. This fight goes kind of exactly like the last one, actually. It's kind of weird, too, because there's going to be one more fight. They're all really close together. After you defeat it, then you can get to the core, and all you can do with this section is the QTE that will destroy the core, but there's also a turret behind it, and you can just shoot at transports for a bit if you want. But there's no reason to. I feel like they had something in here originally that they took out, because there's no point to using the turret. Just go up to the core and then press the button, and Sam will... Well, you have to mash buttons, but Sam will rip the cables out of the core, and then make his escape automatically, and Creon's done for.
Goodbye, Creon. You are fantastic while you lasted, which was not very long.
I mean, a bigger game might make you do that multiple times with the cores, and I'm glad they didn't. But it does also feel sort of like, oh, okay, you fought one unknown, and then you fought one unknown again, and then you did a QTE, and it was done.
Yeah.
They still have some good tricks, but this part of the game is definitely weirdly slow in terms of new things.
Yeah.
The transport Sam escapes on makes his way to a nature preserve, which is a really nice change of pace. Plus you have to work with the unusual shapes of the cover because you're using trees and the like.
It's a really interesting area because it's very different just visually from the other areas because there's just so much green.
Yeah.
You have to reach an elevator, and this is the only segment where there are endlessly respawning foes, and it actually matters, because there are parts where they do endlessly respawn, but it's sort of like a non-element, they're really distant or whatever. But here, you can just hang out outside the elevator as long as you want, and as long as you can put up with Elena and Burns telling you to get in the elevator, just fight people as long as you want.
Actually trying to remember if they're completely infinitely respawning, because I swear I remember there being an achievement for just camping out there and killing the enemies until they start respawning.
I think there's one for killing a bunch of them,
Yeah.
but I don't know that they completely go away.
I swear it's called something like Remember the Alamo or something.
Yeah, once you get to the elevator, there's some guys that get left behind again, and there's another fight with Sam and Burns about it. It doesn't seem to really go anywhere. It's just they really fill time when you're on the elevator up, I guess.
Yeah.
And then once you get to the top of the elevator, like the buzzer, the thing that attacked you on the monorail, you fight another one here, and it's also very easy. It lands, which is kind of cool because it has a land form. But by the time it's landed, you've taken off most of its health, and you'll probably kill it in a couple more seconds. It's really not much of a thing. Which is kind of a waste because you go to a damn control room and pass through, and there's an Argus core there. And this fight takes longer than the Buzzard mini-boss fight, but you've already fought these things. The only reason this one's any different is because the cover here is really sparse and spaced out.
Yeah.
So you can't really hide. Some of the cover in previous fights, you were above it, or you had some like really tall column to hide behind. All the cover here is waist level, so it will only really help you if you're far away.
I remember that Argus fight, and that one was something.
It's harder, but not necessarily more engaging.
Mm-hmm.
You know what to do, but it just feels like it takes longer. And then you get more of an interesting boss fight afterwards, because this enemy shows up called the Crystal Viper, which is not a viper, it is crystal. It's shaped like a person.
It looks like the Silver Surfer.
What's special about the Crystal Viper is it has energy weapon resistant armor. So also if you were leaning on the laser cannon, then...
I find it strange that they would specifically program in an enemy who is laser resistant, because I think there's only like 2 laser-based weapons, maybe 3?
Anti-energy weapons, so the lock-on laser, the LFE gun, and the laser cannon.
Yeah, it just seems so strange for them to program that specifically for what is in the base game, 2 weapons.
Yeah, I mean, especially because why would you use the LFE gun against this thing?
It's just so strange. Why would you use the LFE
And also
gun?
the lock-on laser, honestly, because that's not really effective against single targets as
No.
much. And this also has a QT where it'll like rush at you with its blade arms extended. You can't really dodge it, so that's how you'll know it's coming, so that it just sort of comes at you inevitably. I think I only succeeded at this once, but you'll do like some dodges and counterattack at it. If you don't, you take a fair bit of damage, so you can survive screwing it up, but it is kind of annoying that you can't just find a way to opt out.
It has a really weird QTE too.
Yeah, the timing's not quite what you think.
But I remember it has a very specifically strange one, which I think might be a different attack, where you have like a bar that you have to just press it at the exact right moment, and you never see any other enemy with that kind of QTE, and it's just so strange.
Yeah. But when you kill this thing, it's apparently so powerful that it explodes and blows a hole in the colony. So you have to suddenly retreat to a shelter area. But this is actually kind of neat because this area has like 0 gravity, so you move along a not flat axis, and there's tons of floating debris and stuff, which actually does work as cover a bit.
Yeah, this area in general reminds me a lot of Ratchet & Clank, actually, because one of their main gimmicks, which has been in this area since the first game pretty much, is the gravity boots, where you go on basically a circular or curving plane, and you're able to walk completely freely, so you're basically just walking on the ceiling or on the walls, and it's a lot of fun.
And in this segment, you encounter another unknown. This is the last one, and this one's interesting because you have teammates with you, and it's in a more enclosed space. Since you're now fighting the unknown, but sometimes it's not attacking you, it's even easier. But then once you reach the shelter, Burns shuts the blast doors before all his men are in, because it'll seal off the colony, and this is like the last time they get into an argument about leaving people behind. Sam goes on ahead, and then Winters calls Burns, and they talk about using this colony laser as a lifeline to end the recession. I see why they put this in, because there was a recession.
You just shoot the recession. Just shoot the recession and it's done. Capitalism's so easy.
I can't believe Senator Armstrong was right all along.
Yeah, the whole recession thing, that was a thing that was happening around the time Vanquish came out, and it only happened more. And now it's like a weird plot point to see, because you know where it's coming from culturally, but it's a game set in the future. Not that there wouldn't be another recession in the future, but it feels of its time. Like Metal Gear Solid 2, when they mentioned every .com has its own Metal Gear. Sam proceeds onwards, and he finds Professor Candide, who, really worried about him, who he's been working with. And, Sam's trying to comfort him and tell him that, he's just came here to rescue him. And then Candide gets shot a lot. All the bullets ever find their way into Candide. And Sam turns around, and Burns has used his Gatling gun arm to annihilate Professor Candide.
This is kind of the point where you really start to figure out, oh wait, the dickhead was really a dickhead.
Turns out the guy who is just very grumpy and very eager to leave absolutely everyone he can behind is kind of a fucking jerk. Who would have known?
And he then explains that they're going to end the recession by kickstarting the economy by blowing up Moscow with the colony laser, creating a war stimulus, which was the plot of Metal Gear Solid 4. Kind of. Not the lasers.
It's actually just kind of the plot of a lot of Metal Gear games.
Sam mentions that, you destroyed the targeting computer by shooting trillion bullets at the computer Candide was using. And then Burns says, oh no, well, I've got people who are going to manually move the cannon over Moscow and fire it.
Just take the cannon and fucking push it.
Oh god, now I've just got the image in my head of Burns directing a bunch of astronauts just in space, actually pushing the colony. Just no, a little more to the left. There you go. Okay, now get it out of the way.
Nope, that's Vladivostok.
Oh god.
So even when it comes to aiming a giant cannon, Burns is still the most Burns about it. It's a weird thing for me when Candide died, because Professor Candide is sort of this is a weird tangent to go on, but I've played a lot of mid-budget, mid-level quality PS2 games, and Professor Candide is every professor from a PS2 game.
Yes.
Ever. They all look and sound like him.
Yeah.
But when the PS3 came around, that kind of character faded out for snarky 20-somethings and...
more characters like Elena.
Yeah, and also really cool old dudes instead of weird nerds like Candide.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so this is the only HD PS2 professor, and now he's dead.
Symbolic.
It's not fairly common either for either characters to die, or if they do, not so hardcore.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty great. I have some fondness for Candide for that reason. And pretty much only that, because Sam also does not care a whole lot that Candide died. So, you get into a boss fight, because in addition to Burns having a machine gun arm, he has a giant shield and boosters on his boots. Bootsters. He takes off and gets on a transport, and he has a whole bunch of Marines who also have boosters fly out. Everyone can fly but you. And now you get into a fight against actual human beings. Not super different from Gorgies.
They do a lot more damage, though.
Yeah, they do a lot more damage, and they bleed when you hit them. They're still vulnerable to EMP emitters, because it disables their equipment.
Yeah, it's kind of unsettling, really.
Mm-hmm.
When you kill them, they don't really make any noise, a lot like the robots, but they do bleed.
Yeah, they explode.
It's a very different style of enemy, very late in the game, and it's like, oh god. And it calls back to the very opening of the game, which was also strangely brutal, and it kind of makes you wonder what could have been if they'd gone completely in this direction.
Yeah, because fighting the robots has not much brutality to it. Binary Domain makes a big deal out of it, so even if you blow off a robot's parts, it has like a sort of desperation to it. These are just kind of silly. It's like, oh, look, I knocked its head off or whatever. They're more of a vector for you feeling cool. And with the Marines, since they're jerks, you don't feel bad necessarily, but...
It's still kind of jarring after the whole game of just shooting dustbins. Now you're shooting actual people. Suddenly, like, blowing their head off is really different because it just explodes like a tomato.
Through this whole segment, you're chasing Burns. You get on your own hovercraft to chase him down. And at one point, his hovercraft rams yours, and so you have to do a quick-time event to avoid falling off completely. And this is just a predecessor to the real boss fight. You can shoot him and damage his health bar this whole time, but you're really building up to when you reach the control room. And this is where you fight Burns in an arena for real. He has a constant stream of Marines coming in. He also has his own weapons and shield. And he can also fire his fist at you to get at you from behind cover.
It's very different from the other boss fights, I feel, because it's fairly straightforward but also just quite interesting. Because Burns doesn't really have much special to him. He's big, he's boosters, and he has a minigun. But because of that, he's actually quite special, because if an enemy has been about your size, they usually have something special to them if they're like a boss. But Burns is pretty standard, but still manages to be quite difficult.
It very much feels like he kind of belongs in a more standard third-person shooter. Like, he is the big guy with the minigun, and it's very strange to see him in Vanquish.
Yeah, I can see your point on that. I mean, I think maybe it sets himself apart because he's really difficult. I mean, we talked about the fight with Bogey by himself. Zaitsev wasn't so bad as a boss fight, but this one, I mean, in addition to all the Marine streaming, like, Burns, even on his own, is just really tough. You can't do much to stun him. The EMP emitters are precious during this fight, for if you can get into a good position to take him down. But also all those concerns about blowing people's heads off seem kind of weird here, because yeah, you're probably going to aim most of your shots dead center on Burns' forehead, and he'll be okay.
Yeah, he's fine. He's tough.
Well, when you defeat him, he's one of those, I decided, hey, you're right because you beat me. So he guards the control panel and uses a device on his arm to blow himself up, taking all the other Marines and stuff with him. And then Sam's on a lengthy walkway to the core of the colony when he's attacked by Zaitsev, and then another blue bogey suit appears and also attacks and blows up the walkway. Sam demonstrates that his suit can like hover and fly kind of to avoid falling to his death, and then he gets his way back up to the core, and this is when Zaitsev reveals that President Winters supported the coup in Russia and has one of those speeches about, you think your ideals are good, but actually they're not good. You know what's good? My ideals.
The speech that every Metal Gear boss has, basically.
The more I think about it, the more I see a lot of similarities between this game and Metal Gear Rising.
Yeah.
Though the weird thing is, in that one, Raiden had like a reputation, which is what made people question him. But what does Zaitsev know about Sam? He just got shot at a lot once. And it's like, oh, also that suit's really cool. I think I'm going to copy it, but I'm going to put a jetpack on it instead.
Yeah.
Like, oh, your ideals. What ideals? What are Sam's ideals? I hardly know, and I've been playing as him this whole time.
Sam hasn't really shown himself to have very specific ideals beyond, like...
wanting a piece of the action.
Yeah, beyond, like, you know, ditching people when we could save them is kind of shitty.
Zaitsev, he has an army of robots, so that's not even, like, a thing. I don't know. Whatever. Anyways, the two bogey units appear, and This is the final boss.
Oh god.
Yeah, this is a definite wall. This is where I died the most. Quite fittingly, it is the hardest fight in the game.
It's a hell of a time on very hard mode, let me tell you.
I can imagine.
You are just constantly on your feet, constantly just almost dead, because they never quite stop. There's never really a gap in their attacks. It's rough. I died so many times on that fight on very hard mode. I think I died quite a few times there on, like, normal, but...
Oh yeah, I sure did. There was a point, because this fight is just so intense, where after I had lost, I actually had to stop to give my hands a break for a moment. The red one fights like the fight you had Zaitsev before. Bogey, Bravo, the blue one, uses a lot more melee attacks. You can never really focus on just one. The best you can do is try to get it so that they are in flight together, so you can slow down time and use an EMP emitter to stun both of them and fight them at once. This part's pretty tough. There's not a whole lot to say about it, but experiencing it, you really can't stop. And you have to pay attention to the sounds they both make to know when one of them is firing, the high power laser that can nearly instantly kill you, or when one of them's throwing out a floating mine, in which case you want to shoot it down before it explodes. I think there's a constant supply of ammo during this fight.
I think so.
I feel like I was at least regularly getting assault rifles.
Like, it would be kind of unfair if they didn't have at least a few ammo drops around.
Once you do enough damage, both of the bogey units fly at you, and you have a quick time event where you do classic pummeling duel. But this time against two of them at the same time. You can destroy one of them, and for reasons you'll soon see, it doesn't matter which one you destroy, the other one will fly up in front of you and say, the wrong one, I'm afraid. And then you have to take that one out. Though it's at this point Sam asks Elena to activate the limiter release on his suit, which extends your ARS gauge massively.
I think it also just generally makes your boost and stuff much faster.
Which is cool, but when I got to this point in the fight, I'm like, I've been fighting two this whole time. Like, I would have liked this then. More meter to fight multiple bosses. Now I'm fighting one, and it's just really easy.
It kind of feels a lot like the victory lap at that point. Like, yeah, go on, I guess you've earned it, I guess.
That's true, but then after you empty the boss's health, because Sam did the limiter release, his suit malfunctions before he can do the final blow, and so it gets up and walks at Sam, and you have to jam all these buttons to wake the suit up, and then dodge as Zaitsev tries to stab you with the bayonet on his gun, then grab the gun out of his hands, and you have to shoot him once, but the gun is wavering around. I failed that part a couple times. But Sam walks up to it, and Zaitsev's face in the unit flickers out of existence because it turns out Zaitsev was never there at all. He was controlling the units remotely with his mind.
Thus making Zaitsev one of the smarter Platinum villains.
Yeah.
But it makes him, as a rival, not really a rival because you never fought him directly. He was just remote controlling stuff. But what is in the suits are nukes. So Sam needs to beat a hasty retreat out of Colony Laser because Zaitsev doesn't want the Americans recapturing it. So he blows the whole thing up.
Goodbye, Satellite Laser. You will be missed.
There's another, oh my god, Sam, are you dead? Okay, I'll buy it more this time.
Yeah, this is at least slightly more understandable because this is the end of the game. I could imagine killing more.
They do kind of go a fair way to, make you think, oh, he might actually be dead after all, but then, nope, he comes through the escape pod, and they hug, and it's a very lovely scene.
And then it switches to Winters in her conference room by herself, and she just says, this is the end of my presidency, pulls a gun out from the drawer, and shoots herself in the head so that her blood splatters on the American flag.
Symbolism.
Anyways, then you get to a fun sequence during the credits where you get to shoot the faces of the dev team members on asteroids, and then it gives you a readout of who they are. Yay!
And that's the end of Vanquish.
Well, there's one other scene. Zaitsev in his pod that's watching the colony explode from a distance. gets a contact from the guy, and Zaitsev says that he accomplished his mission. His master tells him to await the next phase. And it's been some years, and we still don't know what that is.
2016, guys. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling the Vanquish sequel.
It's gonna happen. But yeah, then that's the end of Vanquish. No one accomplished anything they were setting out to do.
Yay!
Half the main cast fucking died.
And what did Sam learn? I don't know.
Oh, my ideals suck, apparently.
It's not what I wanted, but it'll do.
Yeah, I guess that's another reason, among many, people don't like the plot. And I think we should get into that now, because for this episode I asked for some responses via email. They're kind of lengthy, but since we only got 2, I edited them a little bit, but we're pretty much going to read them in full. Alright, so the first one. Dear Sid and guests, I'm sure you've already addressed how Vanquish director Shinji Mikami was inspired by neo-human Casshern for the game's character designs, general sense of high-speed action, and even a cut robot dog companion, which was later revisited by Platinum in Metal Gear Rising. And it's also possible that you brought up how Mikami, in the same interview where he admitted his Casshern inspiration, stated that the only reason it wasn't more like Casshern in terms of combat was that he had already directed, quote, a game with only punching and kicking, unquote. Clover Studios' God Hand. Mikami wanted to make a game where you defeat robots with guns. I, however, would like to discuss how Mikami had already directed a game where you control a questionably cool protagonist in a highly advanced future spacesuit, are rewarded with mostly meaningless points for style and time elapsed, and shoot far too many robots with palm blasts that were supposed to be guns.
No.
That game is 2003's commercial and critical flop, PN03 of the famous Capcom 5.
Fucking remind me of PN03.
For those of you who don't know, this refers to 5 games Capcom was going to make for the GameCube, 3 of which ended up on the PlayStation because they were good, 1 of which didn't, which was PN03, and then there was a game called Dead Phoenix, which they never even finished because it was apparently so bad. Anyways, Mikami has spoken of how rushed PN03's development was, and how some of his unused ideas ultimately folded into Vanquish. As such, do you believe there's any credence to the argument that Vanquish is a spiritual successor to PN03? If so, wouldn't that make Mikami's reasoning for not making a high-speed Space God Hand irrelevant, as he had already made a space game with stylish shooting? Is PN03 somehow the reason that we can't dragon kick a robot's metal ass into the Milky Way from orbit? Respectfully, Goggalord, aka the guy who thought Code Veronica secretly inspired most of Resident Evil 4's campy stuff. P.S. Phantasy Star Online and Vanquish were both published by Sega, and a fair amount of the Vanquish staff worked on the Capcom 5 games and the Resident Evil series. When are we going to get an episode that I can't do the easiest 6 degrees of separation ever on? And it's even tighter than that because Hiroki Kato, who directed Resident Evil Code Veronica, worked on Vanquish as a game designer. Also God Hand. And after Vanquish, he apparently did not find the success he wanted, so he became a farmer.
Fair.
Well then.
This is an article about it. It was an interview with Mikami for Polygon about Tango Gameworks, the company started afterwards. So, I feel like I can answer your question about why he made a game about shooting in space again with what you said in your own email, Goggalore. 2003's commercial and critical flop PN03.
I suppose looking at it completely objectively, it's like, yeah, PN03 would make the whole shooting robots with guns thing irrelevant, but PN03 fucking sucked. No one liked PN03.
Yeah, like, I think it might well be considered a spiritual sequel, but at the same time, as a creator of stuff myself, I'm very much a follower of the creed of, if you can't do it right the first time, go back and do it right another time.
Yeah, it's a fair point.
Like, if you had some cool ideas in there, but the execution was off, just take those ideas and put them in something else. And this is what he did, and it came out really well this time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, in terms of Space God Hand, Metal Gear Rising isn't in space, but otherwise, it's Vanquish with close-range combat.
Pretty much, yeah.
There's a lot of same story beats, it has a lot of ideas that didn't make it into Vanquish. It's got a lot of similarities.
There's a guy in a white suit with a goatee named Sam, except that's Samuel Rodriguez, and he is great.
God bless you, Sam.
Yeah, Jetstream Sam, who doesn't use jets, and Sam Gideon, who does use jets. Actually, yeah, there's also a time-slowing mechanic in
Yeah.
Metal Gear Rising, the Zandatsu. Yeah, what really needs to happen is, since Konami has given up on video games, Platinum, you could just make a sequel to Vanquish and, put some more of the sword in it. You could even make an action game where you have a gun and a sword, but make it good, unlike the most recent gun and sword game, Devil's Third, which is garbage.
Oh god, Devil's Third.
It doesn't look good.
So I think just the fact that he knew he could make a good third-person sci-fi shooter is why he did Vanquish. Still waiting on that game that actually integrates the robot dog into the main gameplay. Because Metal Gear Rising had a robot dog, but you could only play as him in the DLC, and that DLC was not that great.
Yeah, it was kind of a very strange.
Like half of it's VR training.
It does have a really good boss fight, though, and one of my favorite boss fight games.
Boss fight's awesome.
The boss fight is awesome, the music is the best in the game, and I will fight anyone who says otherwise.
Yeah, that's great. Alright, so also we got a reply on Twitter. I'm not really sure what I was thinking when I said, hey, if you want to put forth your thoughts on Twitter, because you only get 140 characters. I guess I could open the direct messages anyways. But Llama Phil wrote in, I bought it because people said it was like PNO3. It's not a lot like it at all. It's still okay, I guess. Yeah? Alright. I was going to get Phil on for the Code Veronica episode, but he wasn't able to do it. And, he didn't like the second half of that game at all. He has some interesting opinions, let's say. He actually has a blog about old racing games called Highway Forever. I'm not a big fan of racing games, but reading about the experience of playing old games actually reignited my interest in retro games.
Mm-hmm.
If we ever do an episode about King of Fighters or Eschatos or something, then you'll have him to thank. One more email. This one's pretty long. It's from our pal Sumdian. Hot off the heels, LOL, of Bayonetta, Vanquish was a game I very much anticipated and played during its launch year. That being said, a lot of my memories of the game are fuzzy from the passage of time, so if something I say doesn't line up with what is in the game, that's why. Let's begin with the plot. It sucks. It's got the kind of fun camp the way the Resident Evil series is, and has a fake Hillary Clinton-looking political figure going for it. However, the plot points feel so disjointed and not unified with the gameplay segments, it's hard to really care about it. I also don't remember much about how it ends, other than there being two twins that felt like they were introduced in the last minute and felt really anticlimactic. I think she's referring to the Zaitsev remote things. I can see why I might have thought that after a while playing it. And, I mean, the second bogey unit does come out of nowhere anyhow, which Sam didn't even seem surprised about. I guess the cutscene with the space terrorist microwave San Francisco is kind of cool and really messed up. Too bad it feels so distant from the rest of the plot. Which, yeah, like we said, that only really comes back at the end when you're gunning humans down. Sam, his name is Sam, right? Is a cool character. He felt a little on the generic side. Okay, maybe a lot on the generic side. But he smoked a cigarette and had stubble, so he was pretty cool. I don't really remember anything about the other characters in the game except there's a mentor figure that betrays you at some point. She's referring to Burns. There's kind of a mentor figure, but mostly he's just old. He seemed alright too, even though the game felt like it did a bad job of explaining his motivations. That's also correct, because Burns helps Sam at a lot of times where he doesn't really have to. And you could maybe say, oh, he needs Sam to move forward, but I don't know, it never really seems to stress how much anyone needs each other, because Sam spends a lot of time saving Burns' men, who he doesn't care about saving. It seems like he gets more use out of Elena than Sam, because she can hack things. Okay, gameplay. I don't think anyone's going to argue that Vanquish doesn't feel great to play. The weapons feel and look cool, and the way the game handles movement is still phenomenal. That being said, I remember the game being really difficult for me, even on the normal difficulty. I largely attribute that to me playing the game incorrectly, so let's back up a little bit first. I love to play character action games like Devil May Cry and Bayonetta recklessly and aggressively. I'm the kind of person who wants to dodge at the final moment to squeeze the last hit of that combo out. So when I came to Vanquish with Platinum's pedigree in mind, I looked at the gameplay mechanics like sliding, bullet time, shotgun, and melee and decided I wanted to get in enemies' faces and destroy them in close combat. The game doesn't really work like that. I'm gonna take a break to talk about that. I can understand seeing that because I, too, wanted to just do lots of melee attacks. And I think the idea that I mentioned for having it drain part of the meter when you attack, I was actually thinking of when I played Resident Evil 6, which is a pretty maligned game, but it has a lot of mechanics, I guess you could sort of say, have some kind of analog in Vanquish. Like you can even slide and stuff, move at high speed, etc., do melee attacks.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing, when you do melee attacks in the game, it drains your combat gauge, which isn't a stamina gauge, but you kind of make that same sacrifice because stuff like doing a stomp on an enemy you've downed with a stun move won't work if you've drained your gauge. So even stuff that doesn't explicitly drain the gauge when you do it on its own relies on you having the gauge. And I think this game could have done with more of that. Like not having you slow down time when you shoot during the boost might encourage you to be more aggressive because you'd feel faster and not like you're putting yourself in a worse position.
Yeah, I like how the game's mechanics kind of work for either a defensive or very offensive play style, but I think they could have done things to help streamline it more.
Yeah, it can be somewhat opaque to try and figure out all of the tricks, and in some ways the control scheme I found kind of screwed me over with trying to learn some of the more advanced techniques, because there's some kind of strange combinations that you have to twist your hand into sometimes. It's like, they could have done more, definitely, but I do like what they did.
Yeah. Alright, so the game doesn't really work like that. There's a cover mechanic in the game for a reason, and it's not just to throw cigarettes out from behind. So cool. Sometimes you need to play a little defensively in harder sections, or you're going to get caught in a crossfire of enemy bullets. I didn't want to do that for most of my game, and ended up dying constantly as a result. Furthermore, and this is my largest gripe with the game, the melee mechanic is pretty much a last resort that should never be used. In addition to being underwhelming, the melee attack would immediately cause your suit to overheat, effectively making you a sitting duck for the rest of combat. The way I wanted to play the game was basically skate around with a shotgun, and then melee enemies in the face when I got close, but it simply wasn't a valid strategy, and that's on me. I can't remember a lot about the non-grunt enemy designs. A few of them gave me trouble, like a weird scorpion thing with a tiny hitbox on its back. That would be the Bia, which is like the tiger wizard. I remember dying there 10 times trying to kill those stupid things. Another gripe with the game was that I didn't know if weapon upgrades would go away if I lost that weapon. So I ended up only using 2 weapons the entire game for fear of losing progress on them. If it was possible to take another weapon without losing upgrades on the previous weapon type, great, but I wish the game communicated that at all. That's fair. There's an on-rail segment in the game. I already normally hate on-rail segments and non-rail shooters, so the fact that they put one in the game all about mobility really sucked. The final boss was cool, but the length of the fight was kind of underwhelming. I remember when I defeated the twins, I was super confused that there wasn't another phase, which I can kind of see. Yeah, the last boss, since it doesn't do anything different when you knock him down to 1. Like, you think it would have some kind of, alright, now that you've destroyed 1, I'm gonna release my limiter or something. That would have made it feel appropriate, actually, if you both did it.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I left the game feeling kind of hollow. The gameplay, which is, again, the best part of the game, felt really good when I was barely getting through encounters. But every time I died and restarted at a checkpoint, which was a lot, it really took me out of the flow of the game until I got to the point where I just wanted to finish it to be done with it. I think I did try to play the game incorrectly, but it's a shame that the game wasn't better teaching the player about the right way to clear encounters quickly and stylishly. It's a game that I'd like to revisit someday and maybe even get good at, but that's so hard with dozens of new games coming out every single day. Alright, Sundian, thank you for that email. And yeah, those are a lot of fair points. Like, I think you actually covered a lot of the complaints with the game. There's a tendency, I think, to look at the game and expect the immediacy of a Platinum game for what sets it apart. And while the game is quick and stuff, it's a third-person shooter model that Platinum built on top of.
It can encourage being aggressive more, but you can't go at it with the exact same, like, really aggressive playstyle that you could in, say, Metal Gear Rising.
Yeah, that is kind of the thing these days. Like, Platinum has very much become its own genre in the kind of stylish action branch, so it is very easy to kind of be lulled into thinking that every single game that they put out will be like that.
Yeah.
And Vanquish is definitely the black sheep of the series.
The only other game that Platinum's made that is atypical is Infinite Space, which is a DS RPG. For whatever complaints you have about it, it exists outside the model of how they make other games, so you can't judge it for that. But this, it has similarities you can think of, and ultimately I feel like because they wanted to make a third-person shooter, they ended up not being able to do the kinds of things that would draw people in to their own game. I mean, it helps in one sense since people know third-person shooters, So you can still play this game like that, and it's still enjoyable. The encounter design's flexible enough that you can have fun with that. As a stop and pop shooter where you can occasionally just boost around everywhere. But I think if you wanted to make it more like a Platinum game, you'd have to come up with a completely different way of how the game works. Instead of manually aiming your gun all the time, you would probably lock onto enemies and then maneuver around them while shooting them. Because I mean, that cutscene where Sam is boosting around the Argus in the airport shooting at it, you can't really aim and move at the same time like that in-game as well, or at least for as long.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you were just locking on and not focusing on aiming, then that could work. And something like using your guns as a go-between for what a melee attack would be. Like, in Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition, they added Lady, and she mostly uses guns in what's a melee-driven action game.
Yeah, she's really weird to play as.
Yeah, but her guns have different effective ranges, and they have different moves that can sort of alter what range you'd want to use them at. I think you'd want to use any gun at long range, but if you use the handgun, you can launch an enemy into the air. And if you use the shotgun, you can close distance with an enemy really quickly. Whereas then with like the rocket launcher, you do more damage if you're further away, but you might also want to use that space to set up a special attack. I feel like what people want is maybe Lady in Devil May Cry 4, but with the pedigree that they developed through Metal Gear Rising.
Yeah, I could see that.
That's the thing. We only kind of realised what we wanted years after the game was made and finished and sent out into the public. So I do get that, and I feel like if they had that same sort of idea when they were developing Vanquish, it probably would have become a better game.
The only other game I can think of that's like it is Binary Domain, which is not a fast game.
It is kind of interesting because there are games that kind of have that same sort of idea with them, like Bulletstorm leads to mind especially, because you have to slide, you have the kind of incentive to be creative with your kills, but it's a first-person shooter and it still feels quite slow and clunky at times.
Because it was partly made by Cliffy B.
I mean, yeah, but at the same time I appreciated what it was trying to do, because it was very different from FPSs out there, which was very much Call of Duty or Call of Duty.
Yeah.
All that aside, it was definitely impressive at the time, but historically now I think people are quite aware of the limits of the PS3 and the 360. This game doesn't run at 60 frames a second like every other Platinum game does. I'd say it probably pushes the limits of the console harder than even later games they made. Metal Gear Rising lets you cut something to 1,000 pieces, but that's like in a limited extent, and then it gets rid of those pieces really quickly.
Meanwhile, you have Vanquish, which is continually modelling and keeping in frame an entire colony, and that's like thousands of parts all at once that it has to deal with continually.
So the whole like you chop stuff up in Metal Gear Rising and the parts don't stay behind, well, they do on the PC version if you want, and that is kind of something that, like, there have been rumors floating in the air every time any like console game that you thought was never going to get a PC release gets announced and shows up on Steam. It's always, oh man, Vanquish is going to happen, like it's gotta happen at this point. It still hasn't happened.
I'm honestly not sure why it hasn't happened. It's not like Bloodborne or Demon's Souls, or it's, those games are owned by Sony Entertainment, so, the license belongs to them and they don't want to put the games on PC. Vanquish was published by Sega, and almost every other Sega game you can think of has been ported to PC, but for some reason Vanquish hasn't, and I don't get why.
In the Phantasy Star Online episode we talked about Phantasy Star Online 2. That hasn't come to America on Steam, but there's apparently a whole lot of bizarre licensing issues surrounding that.
Yeah.
That, they made some bad deals, etc. This game, it's like they just forget it's there. They don't reference it much. I think at one point, before some big show where there were a bunch of announcements, Sega tweeted like an image with Vanquish, but it was just to make a pun about going fast or something, I don't know. It's really honestly pretty frustrating, because the controls would be a little more difficult because you're not using a gamepad. I mean, you could, but for all the aiming and shooting in this game, I definitely think mouse aim would help a lot, and letting it be fast in a different way.
Yeah.
And, Vanquish is also left open for a sequel that never has been announced.
Yeah. I don't know what it could be either, because it's done really well. At least, like, as far as people's opinions of it. You know, you'd have to look really far to find someone who hated Vanquish.
Yeah, I think there's some people who feel ambivalent about it. I don't know anyone who just, like, hates it.
And fucking Watch Dogs is getting a sequel.
Oh god, no.
The thing is, I feel like if you announce another Vanquish, people who maybe weren't even too hot on the first game would be interested to see what they do next.
Yeah.
Platinum Games, when Vanquish came out, they had some recognition, but not anything approaching what they do now.
Oh no, yeah.
Yeah.
If you want actually something kind of close to Vanquish, Platinum made Transformers Devastation, which lets you turn into a car to boost around. You can fire your weapons in an over-the-shoulder mode and do brawling moves. Maybe that's the model they need to work off of, just, reverse engineer their license game to make a sequel to their own original property. Yeah, they might have to work with Sega again to publish it, and I don't know how they feel about that. Or even not, just make another off-brand game. You have a Sam in Metal Gear Rising, which is a Konami-published game.
Yeah.
Who's clearly influenced by Sam.
Oh, this is Bam Sidian. It's doable, and Platinum have shown before that they're pretty alright with retrying an old game with just different names.
And with a sequel, too, they can maybe even expand on the idea of there being different augmented reaction style suits. So maybe, like, Sam comes back and you can still slow time. Maybe you can play as a character who has a jetpack suit like Zaitsev's and have a different game mode.
Yeah, that could actually be really interesting if there were different suits.
Maybe take the upgrade structure from like a Resident Evil 4 or something, or Metal Gear Rising, because that would also encourage more repeat playthroughs. Because even though you can build up your guns in one run-through of Vanquish, you can't start the game over with the buffed-up guns, which kind of sucks, because that means you can never use those specializations in early encounters.
Yeah, it's a shame, because unless you are really focusing on a gun, like to specifically upgrade it, then you will most likely only get it to rank 10 by like the end. You won't really have much of an opportunity to use the rank 10 upgrade, which is really a shame, because the rank 10 upgrade usually kind of shakes up what the weapon can do. It's usually quite special. Even for the assault rifle, just adding on more damage kind of makes it a lot more interesting a weapon.
Yeah.
Because suddenly it's viable in a lot more situations.
I mean, to be fair, there is a mode that encourages you to do more of this kind of thing called tactical challenges.
Oh god, those.
Which you unlock them as you play.
Yeah.
And there's like one specific one of those that has a ton of upgrade cubes dropped, so you can try things out. But tactical challenge mode is extremely difficult.
Yeah.
I couldn't beat any of them.
Same. They're just hellishly hard. It's like some of the later VR missions in Metal Gear Rising. They're just so painfully difficult.
I appreciate them putting that in, but it's not something I can enjoy. It's for people who, okay, God Hard mode, that sounds totally viable.
Nope.
Better practice in tactical challenge mode.
I tried God Hard mode. I beat Very Hard mode. I just died like 5 times in the very first firefight. I was like, you know what? Fuck this.
And if they had like a reward structure or a replay structure, like, yeah, I wouldn't mind trying God Hard mode with like some upgraded guns and maybe a higher ARS gauge or something.
Yeah.
But no dice. And that's all unfortunate, but at the very end of the day, like, Vanquish is still my favorite third-person shooter. It's a really good game, and as someone who works like a full-time job, it's nice to have like a really short game where there are still a few of what Shinji Mikami called slogging through sections, but even then, they're not too long. It's a tight, focused game.
I remember a lot of people complained about Metal Gear Rising for being really short, but I prefer that so much to a game that overstays its welcome. Because if a game's slightly too short, I feel that's like, oh, well, I really wish I could have more. I guess I'll just play that over. But if a game's way too long, then you just lose interest and you don't care anymore.
So if you want to try Vanquish, if you want a new copy, it's kind of expensive, $70-ish on the PS3 on Amazon, or like $50 for the Xbox 360. But used copies are much cheaper. You can get it for about $15 used, and $8 on the 360 used. Yeah, I think that's a good price, especially considering the length of the game. Again, I can see complaints from playing this at full price and it being pretty short. But at this price, I mean, that's perfect. That's exactly what I'd pay for it.
I got it about, I think it was a couple years after it first came out. I got it for, I want to say £10 to £15, and I think that was definitely worth it for how much time I got out of the game, because I played it through on normal. I really enjoyed it. I tried a very hard mode and just bashed my head against that until I eventually won.
Yeah, I got it for a Christmas present, and I enjoyed every minute that I spent on it, so I'd say if you can get it, then definitely do, because it's a very unique experience.
Yeah. You can usually get it digitally for kind of cheap.
Not too expensive, and it's definitely a lot of fun. I'm really glad I was able to play it. Hopefully I can revisit it someday. If a PC port comes out, then I'm definitely going to do that. I'd support that 100%. Or a sequel. Either or.
I'd support a PC port. I probably couldn't run it.
Yeah, but with the hope that one day you can. I bought Deus Ex Human Revolution years ago. I've only had a computer that can run it for 1.5 years.
Yeah.
Alright, so that about wraps up our show on Vanquish. I want to thank everyone for listening. Thanks, Phoenix. Thanks, Amy, for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for having me.
Phoenix, if people want to find you online, where can they look?
Well, on Twitter, I am currently known as Wordiest Bird. I'm to go with the Rux avatar who can't stop gushing about transistors several years later. I'm also on SA, although I don't exactly post there very often. I am known as Wordy Bird there.
Yeah, I don't have a Something Awful account, and everyone I know who has one says not to get one, so...
Yeah, I'll add to that chorus by saying don't get one. I pretty much only post in Cowbox and Panzer's LP threads now, because those are good. Go check them out.
Yeah. Oh, you can just find those on YouTube, luckily.
Yeah.
Alright, and Amy, where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter at GeckoTime8. I'm not on many other places. I have a Tumblr at YourGeckoTime, and I also have a Patreon under GeckoTime. If you want to pledge, I do writing and stuff, and $1 will get you pretty much everything I post, so, every little bit helps a lot.
So you should go do that.
Yeah, go do that. Do the thing. Support artists.
And you can find me still at BeamSplashX on Twitter. Yeah, I mostly just post terrible puns still. That hasn't changed.
For God's sake, don't follow him. Don't follow him, whatever you do.
Well, you don't have to encourage me. I mean, mostly if a tweet does well enough, most of what I'll retweet after that is everyone's disgusted responses. Occasionally I'll have a thought about something, such as that Batman v Superman is the Mega Man X6 of superhero movies. And outside of that, I mean, occasionally tweet about games, might mention streams I'm on. So you can follow me there. You can follow the show on Twitter at ThoughtABTGames. That's where we announce upcoming podcasts to look for guests. That's where we announce streams. I have done a couple to tie in with the first 2 episodes, so one of Code Veronica X and one of Phantasy Star Online. Also, you can find the Tumblr blog for this show actually just at wethoughtAboutGames.com. It'll redirect you to the Tumblr site there. You can follow us on Tumblr, where we'll post all the show notes, if we have any, and all the external links, and links to all the downloads, and to the SoundCloud. And you can also now find We Thought About Games on iTunes. So if you use iTunes, which I installed on a computer I don't use so I could put the show on iTunes, so I can see why people wouldn't. But if you do, ratings and reviews are much appreciated. And hopefully the next episode will come sooner so that there can be some kind of form of listener retention.
When are you going to stream your God Hard playthrough of Vanquish, huh?
I don't have a capture device for my PS3, so if they do a PC release, I will stream Vanquish on God Hard.
You heard it here first, folks.
Hold them to it.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to it. So, you can follow the show on all those places, and I hope that you do. I hope you all had a good time. Thank you for listening, and keep thinking. Good night.